Hello and welcome back to Rad TV UK. Now we've got a follow-up of the undercover police scandal which has rocked the UK over the previous months. Fran Anderson, our correspondent, has been looking into this. Fran, we've now heard that undercover police were sent to infiltrate the Stephen Lawrence campaign. This was Stephen Lawrence was murdered by white racists. He's a black guy murdered by white racists in the UK. The Metropolitan Police, believe it or not, pretty much covered up the murder. They failed to arrest and successfully prosecute the people who we now know carried out the crime. And instead of doing that, they actually sent in undercover policemen to try to smear the campaigners of somebody who'd just been murdered. How extraordinary. And then also we've now heard how they infiltrated a group known as London Greenpeace, who were at the centre of the McLibel scandal some time ago when McDonalds tried to sue them, and I think they sent in their own undercover people as well. So anyway, Fran, what have you got on this latest twist to the story?
Well, yes, Ian, it is very startling that a lot of peaceful campaign groups such as Greenpeace were infiltrated by undercover police officers using dead children's names. And for instance, Paul Lambert and John Barker were sent in to spy on the London Greenpeace group, which, as you said, resulted in, well, actually one of them, Paul Lambert, was the main author of the McLibel leaflet, which resulted in the longest libel case in UK history. So
the leaflet that got them sued for libel by McDonalds was actually written by a policeman who was paid by us, the taxpayer, to make trouble for these campaigners.
That's right. It's astonishing, and one wonders what McDonald's or the McLibel defendants might make of that. I mean, they may have a case in court, you know, to overturn something to do with the case. Because if it had been known, his role had been known, then surely the case wouldn't have progressed in the way that it did, and it may have even been struck out.
Yes, quite. You can't really be blamed for something that an undercover policeman does when he's told you he's your friend. So I think Caroline Lucas, the only Green MP, has raised this in Parliament.
Yes, she's raised the issue of undercover police officers being agents provocateurs, because one of the undercover police officers who infiltrated an animal rights group, apparently his actions are very questionable, because he was very involved, so it's been said, in planting incendiary devices in Debenhams stores in the 1980s.
So the police stand accused of actually bombing Debenhams to try and presumably get these groups into trouble and radicalise them. I suppose that's the strategy.
That's right, and people got arrested because of this, and so that's going to be investigated, along with the fact that a lot of these undercover police officers also formed sexual relationships with the women campaigners in the groups that they targeted, including London Greenpeace, and in some cases the women have had children by these undercover police officers. So they quite rightly feel that they've been emotionally and sexually abused, and it's been sanctioned at the highest levels of the police.
There's some quote about sleeping around or something?
Yes, one of the women that has testified towards to a parliamentary committee, because they've been invited to, everybody who's been affected has been invited to a parliamentary committee to give evidence and give their statements. And one of the women has said, who wishes to be anonymous, by the way, that she was told by one of the undercover police officers who's willing to talk out about this, that the officer in charge of the undercover police officers actually briefed them by saying, well, it doesn't really matter if you form sexual relationships with these women, because we know these types of women sleep around anyway.
That's
so
unbelievable,
sort
isn't
of
it?
showing very sexist attitudes towards women campaigners, as if they're some kind of different breed from ordinary women, inverted commas.
Yeah. Well, I recall that in Israel, an Arab guy, slept with an Israeli Jew and told her he was Jewish, and the courts held that amounted to rape, even though she'd said yes, because she'd been slightly deceived as to his origins. That was a case of rape. So if we follow that precedent, then this is absolutely, you know, shocking case of rape by police paid by us.
Oh, that's exactly how the women feel.
Yeah.
And they're all taking a class action against
Are
the
they?
police. They're seeking compensation against the police, as are people who's had their children's names that are died. They're also seeking compensation from the police as well.
Because if somebody was to decide that they wanted to get revenge against one of these police, perhaps somebody in the criminal world who felt that they'd been betrayed by them, which of course was their job, then they might go back to their family, and that family who'd unwittingly provided the identity for the police might end up getting a brick through their window or something even worse.
Well, exactly. As we reported in an earlier show of Rad TV, I think I might have mentioned there that one of the women activists who was very concerned for her ex-partner who just suddenly disappeared out of her life. She'd had a relationship with him for over 3 years, and she was deeply in love with him and everything. He just disappeared out of the blue, and when she went trying to find him, she unearthed the fact that he had died, the name that she knew him as. She found out that child had died.
Yeah.
But before that, she had actually gone to the house of his place of birth and was about to knock on the door.
Right.
McPherson report showed the police have been found to be institutionally racist.
The McPherson report was the report into the Stephen Lawrence case.
That's right,
yeah.
yes. So one wonders if there should be an investigation into the police being institutionally sexist.
Yeah, I guess, well, they do seem to be, don't they? So,
and one anonymous lawyer has blogged that they should also investigate cases where there have been overuse of strip searching and accompanied by serious sexual assaults of women detainees in police cells. And this often doesn't get talked about or even reported about. It's something that's very difficult to prove because it's the woman's word against the police officer.
Yeah, of course. And as with, presumably with rape, you know, the women aren't necessarily going to want to talk about it afterwards.
And they might think, who's going to believe them anyway?
Yeah, quite all the usual stories, all the usual problems. I suppose that there is some possible justification for these long-term undercover police if they were investigating crime, like, for instance, bribery in the House of Commons, or you know, trafficking of women or something like that. But we're not really talking about that, are we?
No, I mean, I quite agree, Ian, and I think a lot of the women campaigners that were targeted would say that they do understand that there can be some justification for undercover police officers infiltrating criminal gangs and criminal groups. And yes, what a pity they don't do that for the white-collar criminals that seem to get away with anything.
Yeah.
But certainly it shouldn't be allowed for them to infiltrate a peaceful campaign group that's just exercising their democratic rights. They're not espousing any violence, promoting any violence.
No, quite. So it's political policing. It's what we were told used to happen under communism, and what George Orwell fictionally in 1984 said happened in Britain. It makes you wonder if George Orwell was actually telling us in a fictional form what he had actually been told or somehow found out does happen. Well, thanks very much for that, Fran.